So there are proper ways to handle dead animals. So managing manure, managing dead animals, and then managing mud in terms of using practices like heavy traffic pads, using geotextile fabric and rock to create hardened surfaces where you can have equipment and animal foot traffic without creating a muddy situation. So you all went to the horse park Tuesday, is that right? So you toured some of the BMPs that have gone in out there. So the horse park is part of the Cane Run Watershed project, which Ben and I met working on that project. And so that's a watershed that is here in Fayette County and Scott County. And it's about half urban, half ag. And so those practices that were put on at the horse park are good examples of best management practices for agriculture. Kind of some of them are mixed out there, but did you see the large manure storage building? And so the premise of that building is to hold the manure, or the horse muck in that case, covered so that rainwater doesn't contact the manure and then run off into the stream. And that is the same premise as what we would use on a normal working farm as well, to have a covered stack pad or a covered storage area if they're transporting or selling manure, because people do that. They sell, especially poultry litter. It's a dry product and it's easy to sell and transport. So having that covered, and so keeping clean water clean, meaning rainwater not interacting with manure and muddy areas around there. So I'm trying to think of the other practices that are at the horse park that are also, did you see there is a heavy use area pad where the horses, did you get to see that one?
The horse washing stations.
The horse washing station, pervious concrete there. So there is an area at the horse park where the riding concessions, the horses that you could pay to ride those horses, they were kind of, they held them in this area, this pen, and it just became degraded because there were so many animals all the time, and there was just very little vegetation. So it was actually, there's like a gully running through it. It was nearly bare soil, and so as part of our watershed project, my colleague Steve Higgins went in and he worked with the horse park to put in this heavy area pad. And so it's also called a sacrifice area or a sacrifice lot. So you sacrifice having a portion of your pasture in grass so that you can make a heavy use pad. So I don't know how much more time I've got, but a couple months. Okay. So, a lot of what I do and what we do in the College of Agriculture is to try to work one-on-one in some cases, but also as a group through our county extension offices to bring these resources to farmers and to show them that there are different ways that they can manage their property. And sometimes it's welcome and sometimes it's not, because a lot of times farmers are operating on pretty low returns, economic returns. And so to put in a heavy use area pad with a lot of rock and fabric is pretty expensive. And so one of the things that I do is work with the federal and state agencies that have cost share programs available. And so we're thinking like the conservation district, in each county has a conservation district. Logan has 2. So there's 121 conservation districts. Working with the local NRCS offices and also the state level office that promotes conservation practices. And if we're asking farmers to do that, then we need to give them something in return. And so that's kind of the premise of cost share programs, is that we use state and federal tax dollars to incentivize a farmer to put in a conservation practice, because that is going to benefit a much wider group of folks than just that landowner. And you probably mentioned this little, but we all own water in Kentucky. I'm sure y'all know that. Some people are still surprised to learn that even though they own land and they have a stream running through their property, they own that land, but they don't own water. We all own water. And so that's just the rule. And some people don't like it. But that's why you can't just do whatever you want to in a creek, because we all own it. So
want to make sure that Carmen has enough time to talk also, so I'm going to go to Carmen next and we'll have some questions.
Okay,
I'm gonna stand up here.
I got stuff for you guys. All right, so I work across all these areas, and there's no way in the world I'm gonna cover every single issue, so I figured I'd give you guys some resources. When I do stuff with my classes, I like to talk a little bit about the issues with them, but one of the things I want to do is I want them to walk away a little bit empowered, thinking about solutions they can have, or how they can make an impact, because we talk a lot about problems, and it gets people really depressed, and they think, well, what can we possibly do about it, right?
I got really depressed.
There's a lot of things. So, first thing I'm going to do is I've got a list here of some extension publications. These are written more for the general audience, so some maybe might be a bit more consultant-wise, that will hit some topics that we've covered about in here. These are all free to you guys online. There's other ones as well. So these are just the links for them. I was guessing on the number of copies here, but I think we're good.
We can make more.
Huh?
We can make more. We can make more.
I think we're good. All right, so that's one thing for you. So I'm going to start with mine first because that's kind of what I work in. All right, and one of the areas I do. Some of the big things that we tackle when we walk into it, obviously you hear some of the issues about sediment. A real big one's connectivity. You guys probably did some studying in the field. So one of the big ones is connectivity. In eastern Kentucky, one of the things that we look at is when connectivity is too high, things in the water can't live, particularly like microinvertebrates. So you guys, one of the things that we looked at is when the Division of Water put this study together, and then the EPA does a lot of it off of it, is 500 microsiemens per centimeter seems to be kind of the cutoff at which you start to lose what they call EPT taxa. Did you guys get to go out and sample bugs this weekend? All right, awesome. So your mayflies, your caddis flies, your stoneflies. So those are the things that we kind of look at doing. So some of the stuff we've looked at as well is kind of like coastline land use becomes in Appalachia's forested. It's a big forested area, but again, the landowner has a say in it, but one of the things that we're really trying to encourage is reforestation. Well, when SMACRA came about, one of the things they were really worried about was stability. So invertedly, you get a lot of land that's, if I'm a tree, I don't do well in this, right? How many of y'all have a garden? What do you do with your garden when you're ready to plant? You till it, right? The soil's nice and loose so the roots have a place to go. So a lot of the work we started doing working with forestry as well is looking at how to regrow hardwood forests. So there's a lot of techniques for that. We have sites that we built plots and showed them different ways where this is how it was done to let's just put the soil down really loose, dump it out the back of the truck, and trees grow fantastically well in that. All right, not going to cover all that in one time, but I have a nice little video that was made just for teachers with a teacher guide that goes with it. If you guys are interested in this topic, kind of talks in about how it goes. All right. So Amanda's right. I love to give away these things.
I know you passed it out.
All right. So this is something that kind of comes across and helps you. Another thing that we're working on is I do a lot of work with streams. So in Appalachia, we have had a few thousand kilometers of streams lost or impacted by mining or different things like that. And so one of the things we look at is how can we potentially rebuild the stream system. So on the University of Kentucky property, we have built about a mile of streams that are ephemeral, which means there's a box underneath there. I had Tyler go bring them. It flows in response to rain. We have intermittent ones, which are seasonal, and then we have perennial, which flow all the time. So on there, some of the work that we've been doing is looking at how we can regrow a forest, rebuild a stream system out there. This is something we use with students. They'll come out. We've got plots that they look at the trees. If this is something you guys think you're interested in, let me know, and we can kind of show you some of the stuff that we've done. But if you guys cover any kind of issue with resource extraction, mining, that sort of thing, it's kind of nice in the end to show these are some things that we've been working on. Other stuff that colleagues in my department, like Richard Warner, are working on, or other kinds of systems where we can kind of eliminate some of the ponds that are out there. We can eliminate, let's say, valley fills. How can we handle or think differently and outside the box about how we've been doing things in the past? And we've been able to do some of those things. So those are on there, pictures front and back, to kind of show you guys what some of that's like. They're great things. We use a lot of those with the students. They can come out and look at tree sampling, they can sample bugs, they can look at soils, all kinds of things. The other thing I would hit on is you guys talked a little about like the connectivity issue. One of the big things is with the say sandstones that it's in. Another thing we try to get across with the students is we're all different in this room, right? Well, one kind of sandstone is not the same as all of them. Different ones produce different levels of connectivity. Some stuff is okay, some stuff is not. So we've been doing a lot of things looking at how we can find those materials that are going to be problematic and produce high connectivity or selenium and keep them away from the water. So that's another thing that we kind of talk about with the students is just because somebody says one thing, you kind of gotta, like, it's just sandstone, well, it's not, or it's shell, or it's this, you gotta kind of dig into the problem. And so that offers a lot of opportunities for the students to be able to do some testing and try to isolate what that issue is and start thinking outside the box. That's some of the mining stuff. I brought a lot of other stuff I do with stormwater. And that causes certain boats. So these are going to be some of the kind of urban areas. Fayette County, I think, has got some really awesome education type stuff that's been done with the consent decree. You guys have talked about Clay's Mill. There's MMS, Montessori Middle School, Kentucky, Stone Road has a project, Mill Creek. Those are all fantastic outdoor classrooms. Rain gardens are another great thing you guys can do on your all's property or someplace nearby that offer a plethora of things to study with students and are things that students can actually get out there and build themselves. So those are some cool things with it. These are some lesson plans that are parts of it. I've got the stuff online if you're interested, that I put together one of our students' projects put together for, it was targeted for 3rd through 5th graders, but I was told about it much. But my son did it too when he was in kindergarten, but we use a detective theme with the kids. And we spend kind of 5 days on, for a couple hours, 5 days, on going through ideas, identifying everything from the basics of the water cycle to understanding why we have more runoff when we put impervious. I think Tyler brought my bottles out. Did you guys got to see those? We do lots of hands-on things with the kids, from looking at different soils, because different soils, the water goes through at different rates. So if I have a clay soil, the water goes through real slow, so we'll take a little Tupperware, put clay in it, put water on it, put holes in the bottom, you see the water can't ever come out. Then we'll put sand in, stuff like that. We let the kids kind of mess around and do it. So that kind of works. These are just some of the things that are there, and you guys want some others.
Do you have teachers that would want to build a rain garden at their school?
I can, yeah. Cassidy Elementary is where my kids go, and they're actually interested in doing that. And so I've been working with them some on kind of putting those together. If you guys, I don't know if anybody, I know Alan Fryer in Geology got a hold of me, but I think we have a rain garden on Farm Road, which is across from the stadium. That was one that was designed by my students. I worked with landscape architecture to refine that, and our department actually built it. So I did that one out there. And we collect data on that and use that in our classes. Other teachers do, but I'm also going to come do some stuff I did with the 4-H group that's high school. What we did kind of incorporate the rain garden stuff, and there's an amazing amount of things you can do. Evapotranspiration. How in the world do you teach that? So one of the things that we do is we get different plants, and we let the students kind of weigh them, and we make some predictions about, does size matter, does color matter, does the plant matter. After we've weighed them, put a certain amount of water on it, and then come back and weigh them over days, and you can see the rate of water that's lost. So they actually get a chance to use Excel, which is something that we find a lot of students coming in don't know how to do, but really should. They get to kind of test a hypothesis to what they predict come out right, and they get to do some measurements off it. It's really, really simple. With rain gardens, some of the big things was like this vegetation, but the other part is you want that water to infiltrate hopefully faster than what it would in the native soil. Around here, we've got a lot of clay in our soil that doesn't infiltrate fast. So we do a couple things. We either loosen it up a lot, and we also amend it, which basically means we put some sort of sand into the system. One of the things we also do with the kids is let them figure out what they should put in. Because I can't just do all sand or my plants aren't going to grow well. And I can't do all clay because my water's not going to infiltrate. So we've done stuff as simple as give them sand, give them maybe some like leaf litter type of compost, give them some of the native soil, and let them determine the ratio that they ought to mix and test it out. So one group might do a 1-to-1 of sand and native versus one group might do 1-to-10. As an engineer, I care because I got to pay a lot of money for the sand. So I want to maximize my infiltration by minimizing my cost. And so if you're interested in that, you can put cost aspects into it, and they can start to try to test things and then figure out what they would want to do. What we also did with this 4-H thing, because we have a rainfall simulator, so we basically can build something that rains, is we built ourselves a little house out of like plywood and 2x4s. And basically it just rains on this house, and then it goes off to boxes that we fill with soil. And so we had the kids, when they learned about amending material, we went toward the rain garden, we learned about the plants. Then we gave the kids some shovels and said, okay, let's design your own rain garden and build it. So they would have to figure out, measure, okay, how fast is it raining, how much is coming off, and we went through some basic principles of how they could convert that, and then they would design their rain garden, and then they would build it, and then we would test it and say, okay, well, how will it work? Because the other thing we have to think about when we're designing things is where these are a lot of times located in urban areas. We would like them not to look like a giant detention basin in a big box. So we also start to factor in things like, how do you get creative in your design? How do I encourage you to want to come and interact with this rain garden and learn something about it? Ben mentioned knowledge, education. So in 2008, you guys paid for a study to ask people their basic knowledge about stormwater, okay? Guess how many people knew what a watershed was when they surveyed them, percentage-wise?
All of them.
How many people knew in that survey?
10%.
I'm going 5%.
1.
It's a house with no water, right?
8%, a lot of people say that. 8%, only 8% knew what a watershed was. So another thing we do a lot of besides just doing that is rain barrels. Now rain barrels aren't going to do a lot to help the amount of water coming off of this building, but they're awesome for getting people to think about water, stormwater type issues. And they're cheap and easy to build. You can go to Lexington Container Company, get a pickle barrel, and build one super easy. And I've got a link on there to how you kind of do that. I do that with the freshman course I teach. Now, if you're worried about them cutting their hands off, you can pre-cut a lot of things. They assemble it. But it also brings in artistic, right? Because they're gonna have to decorate it, they can donate it or figure out where it is, or you can put it at your school. But if nothing else, it's going to teach people, hey, there's water coming off of this building. It doesn't just magically go away somewhere, and makes them think about stormwater. Other stuff I've done with kids that y'all can do at your school is we just run around and look at stormwater systems. Oh, there's an inlet there. Did you guys notice that? Where does it go? To be amazed how much trash is in there. That's another big thing. Trash is a huge pollutant. We don't think about it, right? You guys heard of poop? You've heard of temperature, conductivity. We don't think about trash. Just the simple fact that it's near DC. They actually have, you guys talked about TMDLs or total maximum daily loads. They have one for trash up near DC. It's such a big problem. You laugh about that, but there is so much trash that comes around here, and almost all that's related to food. 80% plus is related to food. Your pop bottle, your wrapper, put it on your car, you drive away, you don't think about it, but it goes into the storm drain and eventually dumps out in my creek. So those are just some things that we've done kind of with the kids, just to kind of maybe spark some ideas. There's a lot of stuff that I've tried, some works great, some doesn't, but I've given you guys the stuff that we've done with them that they seem to really like. Project-based learning, I love it, because you give them a big picture project and they have to figure out these little nuggets along the way. We'd like to do a lot of community service type projects with my students where they kind of have to interact with students, because these are eventually going to be engineers. They're going to have to interact with the public. We've done some stuff with Ben where they have to kind of get that back to it. But I wholly encourage you guys on it. My cards are up here if you guys want anything, but we do work with other folks around, and my appointment is also extension. I'm predominantly research teaching, but I do have part of my appointment is extension where we will help you guys brainstorm some ideas or figure out some kind of resources. Okay?
1 minute for questions for lunch.
You're right.
Really quick one. Where did you say we get pickle barrels?
Lexington Container Company. Yeah, you can. They have a pretty nice. They have a nice website. They also have some other ideas for you guys. Like if you're into composting, you can take one of these barrels and put it on a burner and actually use that as well. So that's something else where I'm looking at to help out with Cassie is they want to put in a composting system so they can start looking, and because they're looking at different levels of kids too, all the way from kindergarten all the way up through fifth. And how do you use these in multiple lessons that you may teach? And how do you get somebody besides science, but also maybe an art teacher out there or something like that to incorporate things?
You can build an aquaponics system out of them too. They can be kind of large, but.
Two things I wanted to mention, especially with them. You know, I've got one of the rain barrels that the city underwrites the cost. They don't give you the barrel. I think I paid $70. It was like $125 system. So I've got money invested in it, so I'm using it. If you give it to somebody, it may wind up in the back corner of their yard doing nothing. So, you know, if you all decide that you want to do a rain barrel project, I would encourage you to have the recipient of that rain barrel invest something in it themselves. And it's more likely to get put into use and maintained and so forth than if you just give it away and they consider it, you know.
And the pickle barrels that looks like a container can be around $25.
Yeah.
So it's not really
Yeah,
expensive.
yeah.
If you get them to buy.
But you can fix them up and then sell them for $50, whatever. And then the other thing, a question, especially in terms of planning these mitigation systems and so forth, and we're trying to project how much capacity the system's going to need, blah, 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 into the future. Of course, we have past climate data that we can base some of these projections on. It's always rained X amount in July. This July is not typical, but maybe this July is the new typical. You know, so how much climate change information data is going into your all's projections?
How much is out there?
Yeah.
It is talked about everywhere. Everybody's talking about climate change. We need to use that data. There is no data that anybody says this is true. This is what it's going to be. So 0 right now.
Okay.
It's talked about. It will be a big thing. I mean, but if it does, I mean, we will have to adjust all of our studies, all of our pipelines. I don't know when that'll come about. I don't know when we're going to get
But the idea that past events are predictive of the future is no longer really a valid. I mean, people recognize that's not necessarily the way to go.
Yeah, this is called stationary, and I guess the buzz term in hydrology probably the last 5-10 years is stationary is down.
Okay.
And so a lot of agencies are water-related agencies, federally, struggle with that issue. For example, in the past, the U.S. Geological Survey would go and they would instrument a stream and measure the flow maybe for 20 years. And they would say, okay, we've got a good baseline. We can now use that to predict future values. And so in a lot of cases, they got rid of those stations. We've lost hundreds of gauging stations. And so now they're struck with the fact, oh no, what do? We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we're not monitoring it. So it's a big issue. So a lot of all these engineering structures that are designed for stormwater are all based on that assumption. So it's a huge issue that people are just now starting to grapple with. Is we've designed all these structures on the past, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So one of the ways that people are trying to look at that is now to start developing systems that are adaptable. So as an example, when you have these storage systems, you can now use those to adapt if we get a much bigger storm we anticipate. We can try to
amazing way to get around that. And I think we're going to hear more and more coming out of the EPA. If you match hydrology, instead of matching just a certain flow rate that comes from a certain storm, if you can match the site as close as possible to the existing condition, like before you developed it, the site would accept this much of a rainfall. No matter how much it was, it would accept this site, this much, and some would run off. If you can match that as closely as possible after development, contain and reuse that water and do different things, you can get away from the effect of so much of the effect of climate change.
Okay.
And that gets a lot of thinking to what he's talking about, just with like low impact development and trying to do small things where you're at versus this really big thing at the end of like a development project.
Well, and another interesting point, I just want to throw, is that there are EPA regulations and federal oversight and so forth, but the design of systems to deal with these problems is happening at the local level, very individualized basis in a lot of cases, and there's a really grassroots kind of movement to deal with these issues rather than a top-down, imposed solution.
Great conversation. I'd like to continue it over at lunch. Here's the rule of thumb for all my teachers. You may not sit at a table full of teachers. You've got to make sure you have at least one of these folks from the panel discussion or Jim or Linda at your table and see if you talk with them.